Welcome to CYC News for today, the 15th of December 2013 and the 6th of Kiak 17:30 AM. I'm John Mazoon.
And I'm Marina Michael. In today's headlines, Bishop Angelous testifies to American Congress about attacks on Egypt's Copts. Mandela lying in state ends with final rush from South Africans. US House passes two-year cross-party budget deal. Brotherhood trial halted in Egypt for the second time. And a conflict in Syria sees Islamist rebels kill Adra civilians.
Starting with the American Congress, where His Grace Bishop Angelous, General Bishop of the Coptic Orthodox Church in the United Kingdom, said the extremist attacks against Christian churches in Egypt have increased since the January 25 revolution in 2011. Extremists have targeted Copts amongst other minorities due to a breakdown of law and order and the growing culture of impunity in Egypt.
In his testimonial at a hearing held by the Committee on African and Global Health and Human Rights, His Grace clarified that despite the hopes given by the January 25 revolution, such as aspirations, freedom, and the establishment of a state of law, the suffering of Copts has increased rather than the anticipated decrease. The hearing was originally scheduled to be held on the 1st of October, but was postponed to the 10th of December, according to the declaration of the UN General Assembly in 1950. This date marks the International Day of Human Rights.
His Grace further highlighted the historic suffering of the Coptic Orthodox Church in Egypt with the reign of Emperor Diocletian in 284 AD and the Islamic invasion in the 7th century, which was considered the most powerful wave of persecution against Christians.
Hundreds of South Africans pushed through police lines in a last-ditch bid to see Nelson Mandela lying in state in the capital Pretoria. They were hoping to be the last of some 50,000 people to pass through the Union buildings on Friday, where the former president's body has lain. Officials say at least 100,000 people have visited the venue over the past 3 days to pay their respects.
Mr. Mandela's coffin was taken from the building shortly after doors closed. The coffin was escorted by a guard of honor to a waiting hearse as military helicopters circled over the city. The body will remain in Pretoria overnight, and there will be a ceremony at a local Air Force base on Saturday morning to allow members of the governing African National Congress to say the last farewell. A funeral will mark the end of a period of commemorations in South Africa since the 95-year-old's death on the 5th of December.
The US House of Representatives has approved a two-year federal budget bill in a strong showing of cross-party support, further avoiding the specter of another government shutdown. The measure, written by the Republican and Democratic heads of the House and Senate budget committees, respectively, was approved by a 332 to 94 vote. The budget proposal next goes to the Democratic-led Senate for approval. US President Barack Obama has already publicly endorsed the bill. The deal was reached on Tuesday and aiming to reduce the federal deficit by up to $23 billion. It was met with overwhelming cross-party approval in a Republican-led House despite initial attacks from conservative activists.
Critics have said that Canada Post's decision to phase out home delivery over 5 years is the wrong way to turn around the agency's financial struggles. The change, along with an increase in the cost of stamps and as many as 8,000 job cuts, was introduced on Wednesday. Labour unions and opposition legislators have said the agency needs to focus instead on making money. The service faces a projected $1 billion Canadian loss by 2020 without fundamental changes. CBC News reported that Canada Post lost 73 million Canadian dollars in the third quarter of the current fiscal year. The Postal Service put the declining revenue down to the rise in digital communications.
Egyptian judges have halted the trial of leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood after they disrupted proceedings. The three-member panel referred the case to the Cairo Appeals Courts after the defendants, including General Guide Mohammed Badia, chanted down with the judiciary of the military. It's the second time judges have recused themselves from the trial. The authorities launched a crackdown on the Brotherhood after the army ousted President Mohamed Morsi in July. Thousands of the Islamist movement's members have been detained and almost 1,000 people were killed in clashes when troops cleared two sit-ins in the capital by people demanding Mr. Morsi's restrainment in August.
Activists and eyewitnesses have said that an attack by Islamist rebels has left at least 10 people dead over the past 2 days in the Syrian town of Adra. Reports said that most of the victims were from minority sects. State media said on Friday that the army had launched a broad offensive in the direction of Adra. Pre-government forces are thought to have been behind most recorded massacres in Syria, but rebels have also been accused of atrocities.
Adra and the surrounding area have been the scene of heavy fighting between government and rebels in recent days. Adra is approximately 21 kilometers from Damascus and is a religiously mixed town where reports say many of the civilians killed were from the same Alawite minority as President Bashar al-Assad, as well as some belonging to the Druze community. At least one pro-regime fighter was also killed in the clashes.
And now we will have a short break. We will be back after these CYC messages. Welcome back. You're watching CYC News. Ford has announced plans to hire 11,000 workers in the US and Asia in 2014 as part of the global expansion plan. Ford intends to launch 23 new vehicles around the world next year, more than double the number released in 2013. The company says it will be the fastest expansion in 50 years and includes the new Lincoln MKC and the all-new Transit family of commercial vehicles. About 5,000 workers will be hired in the US and 6,000 in Asia, where Ford is opening 2 plants in China next year. The recruitment drive represents an increase of close to 7% of Ford's total workforce and is the biggest hiring push from the firm has made since 2000. Ford's president of the Americas, John Hendricks, made the announcement at an event introducing a new research vehicle testing driverless technology.
And on to health news, where the World Health Organization has reported that the number of people being diagnosed with cancer in the world each year has leaped to more than 14 million. The data for 2012 shows a marked rise on the 12.7 million cases in 2008. In that time, the number of deaths has also increased from 7.6 million to 8.2 million. The rising burden of cancer is being driven by the rapid shift in lifestyles in the developing countries to more closely reflect industrialized countries. Rising rates of smoking and obesity, as well as people living longer, are contributing to the rise.
Lung cancer, which is mainly caused by smoking, was the most common cancer globally, with 1.8 million cases, about 13% of the total. The World Health Organization also described a sharp rise in cases of breast cancer. Both the incidence and mortality have increased since 2008. The disease is now the most common cancer in women in 140 countries. The World Health Organization said there was an urgent need for the advances made in detection, diagnosis, and treatment of breast cancer to be implemented in developing nations. The organization also predicts the number of cancer cases will soar to more than 19 million a year by 2025.
European food regulators conclude that the artificial sweetener aspartame is safe and poses no threat to health. The European Food Safety Authority brought forward its review planned for completion by 2020. At the request of the European Commission, since it came into use in the 1980s, a number of the medical studies have questioned aspartame's safety. The EFSA says it left no stone unturned during the full risk assessment. As well as looking at the available clinical evidence, the EFSA said it listed to the stakeholders and considered over 200 comments submitted to the online public consultation.
Prince Harry and his fellow adventurers in the Walking with the Wounded expedition have arrived in the South Pole. The group stood at the bottom of the world at 1200 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. After more than 3 weeks of pulling sleds, 12 injured servicemen and women from the UK, the US, and the Commonwealth were on the 200-mile walk. A competitive element of the expedition has been suspended because of difficult terrain.
Team UK, which includes the Prince and 4 injured British soldiers, had been racing against a US team and a team comprised of Canadians and Australians. Ed Parker, the expedition's director and a co-founder of the Walking with the Wounded charity that organized the challenge, said we always knew that this wasn't going to be easy. But this is what makes the challenge so exciting.
And that's all for CYC News today. Stay tuned for more Christian content on CYC. I'm John Mazieu.
And I'm Marina Michael from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Good night and God bless.